So by now, of course, you'll have heard the headlines. Blake Lively filed a complaint against Justin Baldoni for sexual harassment and for fostering an absolutely toxic work environment on the set of It Ends With Us. And let's be clear, this isn't just about Hollywood drama. This is about boundaries, respect, and the audacity of somebody thinking that the word no is negotiable. But first, let's set the stage here, okay? Blake Lively. Polished, professional, queen of doing her job without the drama, walked into a January meeting in 2023 with Sony and laid out 30 demands. And before you clutch your pearls about the number 30, let's call them what they really are. Boundaries. A detailed, bullet-pointed guide on how not to treat your coworkers like props in some weird therapy session. So what's on this now infamous list? Well, just the basics, like don't show nude pictures of women, including your wife. Stop talking about your corn addiction. And my personal favorite, no biting or sucking my lip without consent. Which begs the question, who told that was okay to even begin with? Look, there's a deeper conversation to be had here. Because when a woman has to explicitly state that her body, her faith, and her grieving processes are off limits, it's not just about the list. It's about the fact that somebody made her feel unsafe enough to need a list. And if that doesn't scream power imbalance, I don't know what does. And I don't care if she's Ryan Reynolds' wife. So let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't the first time we've seen men in positions of power push boundaries and then act like they're the victims, especially once they're called out. Remember Harvey Weinstein, or even Josh Whedon, who was exposed for years of emotional manipulation and workplace bullying? I mean, for me, I think the pattern is clear. I think men like this weaponize their nice guy image while quietly stepping over people's boundaries. It's all a manipulation. And Justin Baldoni, well, he's so, I don't know, cheesy, because his brand is built on this sensitive feminist ally, and he's a guy who actually wrote a book about redefining masculinity. But actions, my friends, speak louder than TED Talks. Because you can't preach about respecting women and then turn around and violate their trust and their physical space. I mean, so let's talk about why a scenario like this actually happens. So psychologically, people like Justin often operate under the guise of oversharing or emotional vulnerability as a way to blur boundaries. Think about it. If he's crying in Blake's trailer for hours, she's less likely to call him out because she doesn't want to feel like the bad guy for not comforting him. It's a manipulation tactic called emotional dumping. And let's not pretend that his tears absolve him of guilt. Because in this case, this is a classic boundary testing behavior. First, it's crying in the trailer. Next, it's barging in while she's undressed. And by the time he's biting her lip without consent, he's already convinced himself it's okay. Because in his mind, they have a special bond. Spoiler alert, that's not a bond. It's coercion. And you just think of how brave Blake must have had to been to hold that meeting. So back to January, Blake walks into the meeting and says, "Here's what I need to feel safe on set." And what's wild is that every single point on her list is something that should have already been happening. Like, why is it revolutionary to ask that a director not discuss his private parts or his religion with the lead actress when they're doing a professional job together? I mean, yes, imagine if your boss came to your cubicle and started a conversation. So imagine he starts talking about his corn addiction. HR would have had them out the door before lunch. But in Hollywood, in crazy Tinseltown, somehow that just becomes your normal Tuesday morning. And here's where we need to talk about the toll that this takes on women, especially women in these situations. I think a lot of us have experienced things like this. Psychologists call this the double bind, where women are damned if they speak up and damned if they don't. I mean, Blake could have stayed silent and endured, but I don't think that's who she is. Instead, she chose to draw a line in the sand, and guess what? She's been called difficult for it. And I guess after the negative PR campaign, a lot of people, myself included, were calling her difficult. But it must have been so exhausting to have to go on set every day and manage somebody else's behavior, to walk into work thinking every day, how do I control a situation that's going to leave me shaken? Because honestly, that's what Blake was dealing with. And I don't think she's just speaking for herself. I think that she's speaking for every woman who had to grin and bear it because she couldn't afford to leave her job. And that is probably a lot more common than we think. And that is a conversation that also needs to be had. So now Blake is suing Justin for sexual harassment and retaliation. And before anyone says, why didn't she speak up sooner? She did. She literally held a meeting, laid out her boundaries, and got everyone to agree to them. But Justin didn't just ignore them. He allegedly retaliated by trying to destroy her reputation. I guess because nothing says, "I respect women," like trying to silence them when they call you out. And his PR campaign was brutal. Brutal. Here's the thing. This case isn't only about Blake and Justin. It's a reflection, I think, of a much larger problem, because we live in a culture that rewards men for pushing boundaries and then punishes women for enforcing them. And the fact that Blake Lively, with all of her power and influence, still had to fight this hard in 2024, this should tell you everything you need to know about just how broken the system is. Because Blake isn't just a talented actress. She's a mom, a wife, and probably one of the most poised people in Hollywood. The truth is, she didn't want this fight. But she's taking it on now because she knows what's at stake. Her reputation. And for that, I think she deserves our support and not our skepticism. Because I think what she's doing is quite brave. So, what's the takeaway here? I think it's simple. Boundaries aren't up for negotiations. Not at work, not in relationships, not anywhere. And honestly, if somebody makes you feel like you're asking too much by enforcing them, they're the problem, not you. And as for Justin Baldoni, it's going to be an interesting few months for him. Maybe it's time to stop crying in trailers and start reflecting on why a coworker needs to, draw up a constitution to deal with you. I mean, 30 boundaries is a lot. And this isn't just gossip. I think this is a wake-up call. A wake-up call for Hollywood, for workplaces everywhere, and for anyone who's ever had to say, enough is enough. Blake stood up for herself, and now she's standing up for everyone who was in a similar situation, and everyone who felt powerless. And I think that's something that we should all be rooting for.